president or something. He's just our head of state, so he represents the country. The power lies in the hands of the Chancellor. Okay, so this is not, he just represents the country more or less. So it's more symbolic role than anything else. Herr Steinmeier, Mr. Steinmeier, that's his name, the name of the president. You probably never heard of him, but never mind. Doesn't matter. And he doesn't live here either. Yeah, this is only where he works. But we can't tell if he's there or not. Any ideas?
No.
With a flag. Yeah, the flag on top of the building. If that's flying, we know that he's there. But wait a minute, it's a bit confusing. Now, we all know, right, that if the flag's flying at Buckingham Palace, it means the king is in, right? We all know that, don't we? The king's in, if the flag's flying. Well, it's a bit different here, because if the flag's flying, he might be in, but then again, he might be out. He might be in, he might be out, he might be shaking it all about, we're not sure. Because all it means here is that he's in Germany. So in other words, if he's not flying, it means he's out of the country, which he is. So now straight ahead, please. And in front of you, you'll see the victory column, right? So this was built by the Prussians. They fought 3 wars at the end of the 19th century, more or less in succession, actually. First against the Danes, then against the Austrians, and then against the French. They won them all. And that led to something rather significant. The founding of the German nation in 1871. Blimey. Founding of a nation. You've got to celebrate that one, haven't you? So that's why this was built in 1873. And at the top, you can see Victoria. She's the Roman goddess of victory, of course. And you can go and visit her if you want to. All you have to do is climb the 285 steps to the top, which you'll all probably be doing tomorrow morning before breakfast, I presume. And by the way, don't you try to negotiate this roundabout, you'll be killed. There are actually, seriously, no, you can see on both sides there are little houses here, and you go down the steps, there's a tunnel underneath the roundabout which will take you out to the victory column. Okay? And also, if you look closely, it's decorated. Yeah? What you see there are real cannons. They were taken from the battlefields, yeah, and they're painted gold and put on there as decoration. So the cannons at the bottom, they are Danish cannons, the ones in the middle are Austrian cannons, and the ones at the top are French cannons. So we're driving through our wonderful Tiergarten. This is the largest park. Tier, it's got nothing to do with tears, ladies and gents, right? You know, crying and sobbing and all that. No, it's the German word tier, right? T-I-E-R, which means animal. And the reason it's called Animal Garden is because originally this was a forest, and it stood outside the gates of Berlin, and it was used by the Prussian kings as a hunting ground, right? So that's why it's called the Animal Garden. That's where the name comes from. And you saw that statue of that very famous Prussian king I showed you earlier, Frederick II. And anyway, he had it turned into a lovely landscape garden. But not for himself and for all his companions. He had it done for the Berliners, so they had somewhere to go to get away from the horrible stinking city. Yes? So that, they could relax in a lovely landscape park. And the Berliners never thanked him for it. And he got so annoyed, he said, I'm never, ever, ever going to build anything more for the Berliners because they just don't appreciate it. And then carried on building. So there you go. By the way, in the summer months, if you come to Berlin in the summer months, if you walk through the Tiergarten, you might get a bit of a surprise. Because it's not, there's a bylaw here saying you can't really, you just take all your clothes off in a public park. But people don't really, they flaunt the law and they flaunt themselves instead. Right? So people don't take that seriously. So I'm just warning you, if you come here in the summertime, if you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. Because the people are all lying around naked. Alright? So I'm just warning you. Yeah? If you go, like I said, if you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. And I had a guy on the bus one day, he was from Alabama, and he looked at me and I said, if you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. And he said, surprise? What kind of surprise? You got bears in there? I said, we got plenty of bears. Some are hairy and some aren't. So in front of us we've got a gate. This is known as the Charlottenburg Gate here. And the reason it stands here is because this used to be the entrance to the town of Charlottenburg. If you look on the right, you'll see a statue That's the Queen, Queen Charlotte, and on the other side is her husband, the first King of Prussia, Frederick I. I'm going to tell you a story about that in a minute. So yeah, this was actually the gate to Charlottenburg, and you can see it doesn't really look like the Brandenburg gates because it's been pulled apart, hasn't it? And the reason for this is this very wide street we're on here. This was built by, or I should say, widened by Hitler's favourite architect, who was called a guy called Albert Speer. And when Hitler comes to power in 1933, he's already got a vision for, you know, the capital of Germany after it's conquered the world, and he wanted to call it Germania. Right? Part of this whole big plan, master plan, was to have two main axes in the city, an east-west and a north-south. So, you know, Albert Speer straight away, when Hitler comes to power, starts to build this east-west axis, and that's why he widens it, and that's why the gate gets pulled apart. Right? So this is the east, this was done by Albert Speer, see here? They never got round to doing the north-south axis for the very simple reason of the Second World War. So that's why it didn't get done. Right? So in front of us, this is a roundabout. It's known as Ernst Reuterplatz. It's named after the first mayor of West Berlin after the war. His name was Ernst Reuter. And originally, this was also just a normal bridle way, just a, you know, just a bridle. And it came up here. There was no roundabout, if you like. And it just took a bend right here, and then went up to a palace that I'm going to take you to now. And because it did this bend right here, the Berliners called it on the knee. Yeah, on the knee. I mean, they could have called it on the elbow, but that sounds stupid, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah, so they called it on the knee. That's what it was originally called. And like I said, Charlottenburg, yeah, it was, like I said, originally it's an independent town. Berlin, as we know it today, has only existed actually since 1920. Now, they had a law for Great Berlin, and that amalgamated all the towns that were around Berlin at the time. Originally, Berlin actually ended at the Brandenburg Gate. So when you were outside the Brandenburg Gate, you were no longer in Berlin, right? So, and before that, Charlottenburg, like I said, was a completely independent town, and it just so happened it was the richest town in the whole of the Kingdom of Prussia. So they were the ones with all the money. For that reason, of course, they could build themselves a really nice town hall, which they did. And you're going to see it now coming up. And it's got the highest tower of any town hall in Berlin. And it was to show off that they were the ones with all the money. And as we drive past it, just have a look at it, because it's beautifully decorated. Yeah, lots of ornaments and, you know, chiseled in ornaments on the building itself. Beautiful building. And this was the town hall of this district, which is known as Charlottenburg. Why it's called that, you'll find out in a minute. So yeah, try and get a picture of the town hall. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's pretty impressive, huh? So in front of us then you can see the tower. Lovely tower. In front of that is of a palace, which is known as the Charlottenburg Palace. And this was actually built as a summer residence of the first Prussian queen. Okay, Charlotte, Sophie Charlotte. This was their summer residence, and she really, really loved it. In fact, she loved it so much she was only meant to stay here in the summertime, and she didn't want to leave it. You know, so she had to go back to the palace you saw in the middle earlier. In the winter time, she really didn't like that. She goes, "My palace is much nicer, and it's really like, it's all light and It's just cozy and nice, and this horrible damp palace in the middle of Berlin is horrible. So she didn't actually want to come back here. Yeah, but she had to, because the king said so. So kind of like had to. And behind it are the beautiful, beautiful gardens of the Schlossberg Palace, which is a bit, I suppose, a bit like Versailles, but it's a bit exaggerated to say that it's the Versailles of Berlin. But they are absolutely wonderful. And the back, if you ever get a chance to go and have a walk around them, the palaces, the gardens of the Schlossberg Palace. Standing in the courtyard in front is a statue, and that is of the great Curvers. He's the guy that I told you about earlier that had the Under the Lindens built. You'll see his statue on his horsey. Yeah, the palace was very badly destroyed, very badly damaged, I should say, in the Second World War. And it took over 25 years to rebuild it. But it is pretty impressive. And this is quite funny actually, because you see the statue, there he is, very careful, there he is in the middle. Half of it's a copy and half of it's the original. And we have this statue twice in Berlin, right? The Pilif, okay, here, that is not the original, right? What happens is this: when the war starts, they take it away from the middle. It used to be stand outside the palace, right, in Berlin, and because of the bombing, they took it away. But what they do is they left the Pilif